This is Caroline from Caroline's Adventure. We all face challenges in our lives. How do some people take those challenges and turn them into powerful results? Join me as we dig into a story on resilience, hope, and joy, and uncover lessons we can each use in our own lives. But before we start, please take a moment to show that 5-star rating button some love, and follow while you're there to be updated every time I release a new episode. Now, before we begin, a word of caution. On this podcast, we regularly discuss topics like sexual assault, suicide, and addiction, which may be disturbing to some. Please take care as you listen. And if you need support in the United States, reach out to the crisis text line at 741-741. Today we are talking with Denise Clanin, and Denise has got one of those cool stories of a path that she started down, and then at some point she decided to follow her heart and actually delve deeper into a creative aspect and becoming an author. So thank you so much for joining us today, Denise.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I usually like to start at the very beginning of your background and what it is that brought you to where you are today.
So I'm currently a stay-at-home mom with 2 little ones, and my husband and I, we moved to Idaho, or specifically the Coeur d'Alene region, like North Idaho, about 4 years ago, and that's where we started our family. And now, in addition to raising our 2 kids, I also wrote a book, a contemporary mystery romance novel called Among the Stars.
That's so cool. One of the interesting things was that you talked about how you had a corporate career, but that you'd always had in the back of your heart this urge to write. What is it that took you from that corporate pathway down to the creative?
So writing has always been like a fun pastime for me. Just growing up, I loved writing stories for myself. Even as a kid, I would essentially get pieces of paper or staple pieces of paper together and write a story and illustrate it as well. And so I've always had the dream of publishing a novel. But then when I graduated from high school and began to pursue accounting in college, that the dream of publishing a book went on the back burner for a little while as I was trying to focus on my career, but it was still there. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago when, after I had quit my full-time accounting position to stay at home with my son, who was just recently born after we moved to Idaho. And it was at that point when I had the extra time to begin writing a story. And so it was the inspiration for this book came from a creative writing class in college that I took for fun, where I had this kind of mystery romance story that I had written a few chapters for the assignment for my class, but I didn't revisit it. Right. Essentially, I had written it and hadn't looked at it after graduation. And it wasn't until a year and a half when I revisited the story and kind of drew inspiration from my family as well as our move to Idaho, because now the story takes place in Idaho. And that was the beginning of that writing journey.
That's really cool. And it's interesting. Years and years ago, I wrote a series that I've never published. I've never had the guts to publish. I enjoy the writing aspect of it, but taking it to that next level of publishing it, I'm so impressed by, because taking something that you've poured your heart into and then putting it out there for others, was that hard for you, or was it just like an automatic, natural conclusion?
So in the past, when I had written a story, I always got caught in like the first quarter of the story. I wouldn't know how to finish it. So I've had a lot of like unfinished projects growing up. And so with this particular story, I was very surprised how the ideas just came to me and I was able to complete the story from start to finish. And it was the first time I've ever done something like that. And so it was amazing.
I love being in that place where things just flow. That is one of my absolute favorite places to be in, because when you're tapped into something that you're supposed to be doing, it's crazy how it just carries you along.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was inspired not just from our move, but also just taking inspiration from family and friends who've supported me along the way, including my older brother who had passed away about 5 years ago. And so this story, it was in part a way to honor him and his legacy that he left behind.
That's so cool. Like, in what way did you honor him?
So there were a lot of like little Easter eggs in there. He was very into classic rock music. growing up. He played a lot of that because when I was living with my parents, his bedroom was right next to mine. So I could definitely hear his music on the other side in his room. And so that was one of his interests. And so I incorporated a few little references to his music in the story, as well as some other references to some family vacations and some family gatherings with our extended family. And so just little pieces like that of memories that I hold dear in remembering are kind of ways that I can use to remember my brother and to remember other relatives who have passed away and just keeping those memories alive.
That's so cool. That's such a special way to pay homage to their memory.
Yeah, absolutely.
In your intake notes, you had mentioned that you had had some hardships that you had overcome earlier on in life. Would you like to talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, a lot of the struggles that my family and I went through was related to my brother, his medical condition. When he was 11 years old, he was diagnosed with this medical condition called NF2, where he basically had tumors that grew out throughout his body, and there was no cure for this. And we weren't sure how much time we would have with him. Some people have a more serious condition than others, and so there's no way of really knowing when he was first diagnosed. So my family and I really wanted to take advantage of the time we had with him, and he had a very positive upbringing with a lot of supportive family and friends. We did a lot of family gatherings, went on vacations, and just really tried to take advantage of the time we had with my brother. But eventually, when he is more young adulthood, so like in his 20s, when he lost his ability to hear, speak, and see well. And so I was watching that happen to him. And there were definitely some real challenges with that. There were a lot of low points in the later part of his life. And so at that point, my family and I really had to lean on each other, and as well as our faith, our Christian faith also gave us the strength to endure some of the hardship that we otherwise wouldn't know how to go through that. But I am very thankful for everyone who's been with us along the way and for the opportunities and the memories that I did have with my brother.
Yeah. Was it, were the tumors internal or were they external or
They
both?
were internal. A lot of them were around the acoustic nerve. That's very common with NF2. And so that was why he lost his ability to hear. But they can show up in other parts of the body as well, and they can turn into cancerous tumors. So there's just a lot we don't know about it. And there's a nonprofit called Children's Tumor Foundation that is still looking into cures or just more awareness of this disorder so they can help people to mitigate the damage that this can cause.
And that must have been, you said earlier how he was so into music. That must have been so hard for him to lose the ability to hear it, that he had been so into music when he was younger.
Yeah, that was why my parents were very good about introducing us to different types of music from different genres, not just classic rock, but also classical, just all different types of music so that my brother could enjoy it while he had his hearing.
Wow. That's wonderful, but it's also so heartbreaking to lose something that's so integral to who he was.
Yeah.
So, do you think that his memory inspired you to get deeper into the thing that drove your soul?
I remember my brother being just a very positive, encouraging person. He had this contagious sense of humor where if anyone around him would just, he had this positive aura around him and brought people together into community. And now, after him passing away, I know that he would want us to remember him in that light. He just always had that desire to have us be just one big community. And so for me, that was my writing has been a way that I want to bring people together in community via storytelling, because I think stories often bring us together because we are more alike than we realize, just the shared human experience. And I think storytelling is one way we can connect together.
I love that. I love that. And that's so true. Anytime I sit down and talk with somebody, it's crazy how we tend to align and click on things that you don't ever realize. You look at someone and think, okay, I know just based upon my own experiences with people, I know what this person is about. I know who they are. I can make some judgments. And then you start to talk to them and you realize that they have so much more to them and that you start to align with one another. It's part of why I'm a podcaster. I love having these kinds of discussions where you learn about each other and you start to uncover ways that you're similar. It sounds like your brother was like amazingly gifted at that.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely say so.
That's so cool. Do you think that you will continue to write going forward?
I would love to write more stories in the future. At this time, I am focusing on raising my baby and toddler, which is definitely a lot of work, but very rewarding. But I am hoping to, once things settle down a little bit, that to resume writing in the future.
And one of the things that I've always been told is that if you've done it once, you've got it in you to do it over and over again. The ability to write a story the first time is the true test. And once you've tapped into it the first time, you inherently know it and it just starts to speak, the stories start to flow through you. So that's so cool.
Yeah. I'm very thankful that to be able to actually have a book completed.
What was the publishing process like?
So I was able to find a hybrid publisher help me with all the legalities with the ISBN and the book distribution and even some marketing support. So I'm very thankful for them because I had no idea of what it entailed to publish a book. There's just a lot of moving pieces and deadlines to meet. And thankfully, I have a better idea now of what to expect. But I think it does definitely help having like a publisher who's willing to work with you and kind of explain the different pieces with writing a book.
Absolutely, because that's why I've never published. Every single time I start to get it out and dust it off, it seems scary to me. Like it just seems so overwhelming and so nebulous.
Yeah, I think it's just getting in there and just like writing something, not thinking about all the long term, like with the book sales or the target audience. For me, it helped just writing for myself. I know it sounds selfish, but I think it helps because if you're focused on the story first and foremost, I think the rest of it will come later. Like you'll figure the rest out later. But in the beginning, it's important to write the story that you want to see on the bookshelf.
Yeah. And that really applies to so much in life in general. And now that you say that, like it makes so much sense because so much of life, if you focus on how big and scary it is, you'll never take that first step. But if
Yeah.
you take just little bitty increments and just focus on, okay, what is my next step in this? Take that step. Okay, what is my next step after that? Take that step. You can accomplish amazing things that feel really scary when you first look at them.
Yeah, it definitely helps breaking it down just into small pieces and just first focusing on the story. And then the publishing process will come later after you've completed the first draft of like your manuscript.
I love that. Like, I love that. That's a really cool perspective that I don't think I'd ever really thought of. Like, you look at books that are on the shelves and you think, oh my goodness, you know, they must have had just an amazing stroke of luck to have it all happen. It's not a major single stroke of luck. It's lots of little bitty steps to get there.
Yeah, definitely.
I love that. So, when your kids are older, do you think you'll go back to the corporate world?
So in the future, I'm not looking to return to full-time accounting. I appreciate all the people and my employers in the past who helped me along the way, but I'm definitely feeling not led into that position or into that corporate field anymore. So I would hope to write again or write more in the future. But I think the chapter of my life with corporate accounting is finished.
I hear you. I hear you on that. I used to be in the corporate world as well, and it was one of those steps that when I left it, I did not look back.
Yeah. And definitely now there's a lot of challenges, even just being a mother, things that I've had to learn along the way. And I'm still learning as I go. We're essentially works in progress till our last breath. And that's something I reassure myself about, even when I'm still learning. And that's okay to still learn.
Absolutely. That's kind of the cool thing about having kids is that they are humbling, but it is a reminder every single day that you're never going to get it figured out. I've got two teenagers, and every single time I think, okay, I'm doing okay at this mom thing. I've got this. And then they grow a little bit older, and it's a completely different ball game. And I'm like, yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing. I am completely clueless.
Yeah, I think that's just parenthood in general. It's just always learning and being like humbled by your kids. But it is amazing to see the progress that we make along the way.
It is. It's really cool. And I would imagine that parenting your children is probably inspired in some way by your memory of your brother.
Yeah, I definitely do talk about my brother to my kids, even though they've never met him. There's still like hobbies of his that I'll bring up and mention. Oh, your uncle was really into this song or like into these interests, and it's just I still like to pay homage to him, even though my kids haven't met him. But I think we're all family, and it's important to remember our family.
And honestly, that's the best that any of us can hope for is to be remembered after we're gone for the positive memories that we leave with our friends and our family.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, would you like to tell us a little bit about your book for those that are in the audience that might be interested?
Yeah. So the story is a contemporary romance that has a mystery subplot, and it is about a character, Natalie, where she loses her father at a young age, 14 years old, to a fishing accident. And over the course of the story, she is discovers herself and what she wants and the people she wants to have in her life. And you see her transformational journey as well as her connections with her family and her friends. And she does reconnect with a childhood friend, Justin, who she had grown up with in Idaho, and they had shared their first kiss in a treehouse. And so there's a lot of nostalgia and like first love themes. And so it has those lighthearted themes, but it does also touch on some deeper themes about redemption, forgiveness, and second chances.
Wow. And those are some deep subjects to tap into along with the young love and the adolescence.
Yeah.
Were you, in writing about Natalie losing her father, were you working through any of your personal loss? Or, as I know when I wrote, it came from I had a miscarriage and I needed something to pour myself into other than focusing on that. And so I just started writing. And I found that it was an amazing way to help me process the pain without directly writing about that pain.
Natalie and I do have the kind of the grieving process in common. And that is something I do touch on in the story, just about how she is processing the loss of her father. And grieving is a lot more complicated than just attending a funeral and then moving on. There's so many different emotions that you experience. And oftentimes it comes later, like years after the person has passed away. And so, like Natalie, I've also dealt with that with my brother, that sometimes there is a song on the radio or just a setting or a photo that I see that reminds me of him and me, like a memory, and that can trigger some feelings of sadness. And it just comes out of nowhere. And that's very normal. And there's no right or wrong way to grieve. And so that's something, the theme I had to touch on in the book is just about that we need to allow ourselves that grieving process. It's okay to feel those emotions, and it's because that person is no longer with us. So there is a void there, and it's okay to acknowledge that. But it's also important to let people in and have community. And that is also a theme that I touch on about the importance of community and family connection.
That's really cool. Is your audience young adult or is it adult?
So I would say more women in their 20s, so young adult, but any age I feel like would resonate with these themes.
And the reason I asked that is I'm guessing that the process of grief, they're probably at the first point where they're really starting to experience that. Unless they've lost somebody as a child, they're in that place where they're experiencing grief and they're experiencing friends' parents starting to pass away and coworkers starting to pass away. And so I would imagine that your story has a helpful aspect in that reading through your experiences that are portrayed in the framework of Natalie probably helps others kind of work through that process as well.
Yeah. And I think most of us have dealt with some kind of grief or loss related to a job or lost friendship or divorce. And so a lot of us have gone through that process of losing something or someone important to us and having to figure out the next steps of our lives. And it can be a little scary, but it's also at the same time, I think knowing that we have that kind of shared struggle, I think encourages us that we can reach out to other people for help and that we can lean on community.
Yeah. Well, as you said earlier, we're a lot more like most of us than we realize. They talk about how there's a huge void of connection in modern society. And I feel the more that we share stories like this about what we've been through and both the challenges, but also the high points, the more it helps us connect with one another and realize that we're not alone, that we're all in this together. We're all connected. We all have loved ones and hopes and dreams and disappointments and failures, and that it's more about how we lean into those similarities than the things that are different about us.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. One of the things I like to do is at the very end of an interview, I like to just ask, is there a last thought that you would like to leave us with?
Sure. I would say that, which is also a theme in my book, is about hope, that there's always hope to be found. And that even if you're going through a really dark time and you feel like there's nobody listening to you or nobody that cares about you, that I would say that that is false, that there is always hope and there are people out there that would want to help you and hear your story. It just sometimes it involves us being vulnerable and opening up to people. And it's not always easy, but it's definitely worth it because I know that nobody's a lost cause. Even if we've made mistakes and stumbled around that, we can always pick ourselves back up and that there is always hope in the world. It's just sometimes hard to see it if we're not being proactive about seeking for help or having that faith that we were put on this earth for a reason and just not to give up on yourself.
I love that. And you're so right, because hope lots of times is the thing that makes the difference between success and not getting anywhere. It's that glimmer that keeps you moving, even when you know that when everyone's telling you to quit, that hope that's pushing you forward is the thing that'll get you through.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Caroline's Adventure podcast. While you're here, subscribe to the show so you're the first to catch new episodes when they're released. And if you enjoyed hanging out with me today, please leave a 5-star rating. For links to social media and more content, visit the description for this episode or go to carolinesadventure.com. That's Caroline with 2 A's, adventure.com.